With the latest Porcupine Tree album, The Incident, you told that it was about the way the media approached certain disasters and that they forgot it very fast. Was there a similar thing that set the theme for this new album?
Well, in a way, yes. In a way, no. Let me explain. I don't think. Well, I know that there isn't a particularly strong concept that runs through the whole album this time. But in a way, everything I do is kind of a comment on, you know, modern consumerism and the way that people interact with music and art these days. Because everything I do is kind of these days, well, actually always, has gone against the trend, which is more towards creating music that can be consumed in small bites. You know, now you have Spotify, you have obviously you still have iPods, and people are kind of getting used to what I call the kind of playlist mentality or the jukebox mentality, which is that you consume music in small parts, you create your own playlists. And my albums have never been really designed for that approach to listening. They've always been designed as kind of continuous musical journey. And this is no exception. This is quite an epic journey, and it's been sequenced to be listened to in that way. So although there isn't necessarily a message behind the lyrics are about all sorts of things, you know, breakup songs, serial killers, depression, the usual cheerful fare that I deal in. I think as a whole the album still has that same sense of politics behind it, in the sense that it's making a statement about the way that we kind of relate to and experience music these days, purely because of the way that it's presented.
You've been making music for quite some time, late 80s, early 90s, but since when did you notice that change in the way people listening to music?
I remember the first time that we were discussing with the record label we have to do an internet campaign, and that was quite a learning curve in itself. That would have been not so long ago. That was only maybe 4 albums ago, like 10 years ago, and suddenly the emphasis had gone from the release date of the album to a kind of implicit acknowledgement that everyone would have heard the album already by the time the release date came around. And that was a very difficult thing for me to accept, because I grew up with the kind of the romance, if you like, or the magic of the big release date. You know, if there was an album you wanted to buy by an artist you really admired, you'd go into the record shop on the day of release, and it was a really exciting thing to take that record back home and play it for the first time, because you didn't know what to expect. And now that kind of idea of the release date doesn't exist, and you also have to accept that pretty much everyone is going to have heard the music, or at least had the opportunity to hear the music by the time the album is released. So I think I became aware of that for the first time around the early 2000s, and it's just the whole process has progressed now to the point where we now sit down, record companies sit down, and we try to figure out any way possible to make people actually want to buy a CD, you know, and you can see that over the last few years record companies have become more and more desperate to find ways to make people still interested in special, you know, in physical product. Special packaging, throwing in extra tracks, a DVD, a fancy box, a t-shirt, anything they can do to make people actually buy a CD, they'll do it now. Which is a little bit depressing to me, because I mean I still think there's something very romantic about the idea of collecting and owning and treasuring something that's special to you, a piece of music, a piece of art, a movie, or whatever that might be. But I'm of an older generation, you know, and the younger generation have not grown up with that same sense of, I suppose you call it fetishism, about ownership of art. But having said that, vinyl is, you know, making a comeback, and kids are getting into vinyl. So I think they do understand it. Kids still like to feel like they're buying in. If there's a band they really like, they want to buy into it somehow, and so just downloading songs is perhaps not enough for them, which is a good sign.
Do you remember the first piece of art or music that you really cherished back when you were very young?
Of course, yeah. I mean, when I was a kid, you know, I got into music mainly through my parents' record collection, and I was very lucky. My parents had very interesting eclectic taste. My father liked a lot of progressive rock, and my mother liked a lot of soul music and disco music. And my father was buying records like Dark Side of the Moon and Tubular Bells, and you know, the great, you know, big mainstream progressive albums of the day. And they always had those beautiful, you know, not always, but a lot of them had those gatefold sleeves with a lyric sheet, and just even the kind of the romance of taking the record out of the sleeve and putting it on the turntable, putting the needle, you know, that I have a kind of sort of romantic idea about that, which I'm sure a lot of people in my era do. But I very, very early on got the collector mentality with music.
Do you remember the first time you went to the record store on your own?
Well, I didn't go with my own, but I sort of dragged my mum in and said, I want that one, you know, I want that.
Which one was that?
It was, I think it was a record by the Electric Light Orchestra, Out of the Blue. I don't know if you know that one. It's a great record with lots of great songs on it. And the funny thing is, that's a good example, because that record came in a gatefold sleeve, and it had like a poster inside it, and also had a spaceship that you could build. You built this spaceship out of cardboard. You know, a real gimmicky thing, but these are all the things that make you really feel like, you know, you've bought something worth buying, you know. And it's not just I think the problem with CD is it was kind of neither one thing or the other. It wasn't a piece of art, it wasn't a piece of software. It was kind of somewhere between a piece of art and a piece of software. And it didn't have that same kind of it didn't inspire that same kind of collectability that vinyl had. And of course now because music now is mainly through Spotify and MP3 download, it has become purely software. It's become completely detached from any physical manifestation, something you would want to collect and own. Although I know a lot of people who still do collect, you know, vinyl particularly now. So that's a promising kind of. You kind of tend to get you always get a reaction against the current trend, and that seems to be the reaction against the trend is now for kids to get into vinyl, which is great.